Today we're turning your Bibles to the book of Esther, is where our lesson is going to be at today. And we're going to look at, most of our examples of our sidekicks so far have been positive. Today we're going to look at a negative one. We're going to look at what not to do, or what not to be like today, as we look at this little bit of a character study on Haman, who is the bad guy, or the villain, if you will, in the book of Esther. As we begin to do that, though, I just do want to mention to you that next week we are not going to do the last lesson in this. We are going to go ahead and jump ahead and get back on schedule. So be sure and grab a quarterly over there on the table before you go out today, and we'll begin that next new unit starting next Sunday morning. So grab a quarterly and on your way out, and we'll begin in that next week as well. So, okay, Esther. I think you all know the story of Esther, so I'll hold that thought for just a minute. But the lesson today, what we're going to focus on is about humility. I just got to kind of, in your quarterlies, the introduction started the little conversation about Muhammad Ali and about him proclaiming himself to be the greatest. As I was reading that, it triggered a memory. So back when I was a kid, my mom worked in a factory, and so she left really early in the mornings to go to a factory. So my dad was the one that stayed at home and made sure we got on the bus, which that was still pretty early too, to go to school. But every morning while we were on the bus, and maybe some of you will remember this, but a lot of times the TV would be on, and Good Morning America would be on. My dad was having, we didn't have any channels to choose from. There wasn't no ESPN at that point, right? There wasn't anything, good to watch. So it was, the three channels that we got, right? And Channel 2 came in the best, right? So, as many of you remember. And so Good Morning America was on. And I remember this one week, they did this whole week-long segment with Howard Cosell interviewing Muhammad Ali. They had a segment every single day. Do you remember? Do some of you kind of remember that? And I just kind of remember watching that and watching him and the interaction that they had, and I was just kind of like, I was impressed. Even as a kid, even in elementary school, I was like, man, this guy is something, right? I don't think I had ever, probably a good thing, I had never encountered anybody quite like that in my realm of people before, right? Proclaiming himself to be the greatest, and all that kind of stuff. And one morning, toward the end of that week, I vocalized or said something to my dad along the fact that guy is really cool. Something like that, right? My dad was not a fan. Why wasn't my dad a fan?
Because he was a draft dodger.
Because he was a draft dodger.
I like Cassius Clay.
I'm glad you said it that way, not me.
I like Cassius Clay way better than Muhammad Ali.
Okay. And my dad echoed that sentiment. And so my dad kind of shared that other side of that, as being someone that was drafted into military service and went and served in that war. And Cassius Clay decided to change his name and change his religion, and or whatever, to avoid all of that. But there was kind of a shift, though, I think, at that time. In popular culture and in sports, for sure, there was a shift in that time from people and athletes that had a humble spirit about them and a humble attitude about them, and to this different kind of thing that we see all around us today, where everybody is debating who is the GOAT, right? there's, I mean, I'm not a basketball person, but, who's better, Michael or LeBron? Okay, yeah, so there are different answers that come right with that, right? There's, Tom Brady was the GOAT, right? Is Patrick Mahomes the GOAT now? I don't know. He don't have quite as many rings, but I think he's more fun to watch. But anyway, I see things through red glasses, right? I admit that. And so, but we've seen this, and we see this kind of shift in culture and society where it's not just enough to achieve, but there's almost a self-promotion. You almost have to be, a certain level of trash talk is almost expected in sporting events now, right? Before the game, after the game, whatever it may be. We got little Kermit puppets in the Raiders. You know what I mean? I'm like, how dumb can you be? Right? I'm like, okay, whatever. But, as if he needed any extra motivation, but even Mahomes is going to take that, you know what I mean? And as a way of, as Bobby Boucher would say, it's tackling people, even though Mahomes didn't tackle it right. But anyway, so pride, humility, we're going to talk about that a little bit today. Even in our awards ceremonies, my goodness, we have an awards ceremony for everything these days, right? I mean, and even in those, they always get up there and they thank everybody, you know what I mean? Or they try to before they give them the hook and pull them off the stage. But even in that, there's this underlying sense of, look what I did. You know what I mean? Look what I've accomplished. Look at how great this is. But when we look at our model, when we look at, there's no debate who the greatest was. Right? There's no debate in our mind of who the greatest of all time is. Right? And it's Jesus. And he was the greatest person that's ever walked the earth. And he carried out his ministry with humility. And as his followers, we're to be like him, and we're to give our absolute best, and we're to do it with humility. And so we're going to look at Haman today, and he's the exact opposite of the picture of humility. So with that, let's just jump into the passage here, and we'll talk about it. Esther chapter 3, verses 1 through 5. Somebody want to read that for me?
After all this took place, King Ahasuerus honored Haman, son of Hammedatha the Agagite. He promoted him in rank and gave him a higher position than all the other officials. The entire royal staff at the king's gate bowed down and paid homage to Haman, because the king had commanded this to be done for him.
Oh my, spoken like a true Grandpa. No, that's good. I haven't seen the VeggieTale version though, by the way, but now that you mention that, I kind of got away from the VeggieTales a little bit. The early ones were really, really good, and then
That's a real early. Right.
Oh, is it a real early one?
It's an early one.
Well, how did I miss that one then? Okay, I'm gonna have to go back and check. I'm gonna have to
I've
check.
got that song stuck in my head.
I could play it.
I got that song stuck in my head now.
But here we have Haman literally showing no humility whatsoever in receiving this honor, right? Instead, he is going to seethe with rage over one man, Mordecai, who doesn't bow in his honor. So guys, I just want to, there's a lot here. If you have questions, feel free. If you have insights, jump right in here. Because honestly, this is one of those lessons where it's kind of hard for me to teach because it's a simple story, then we're pulling this out of this story, right? And there's a lesson here to be learned, but we're kind of pulling pretty hard. But there is a good discussion to be had, I think.
So Steve,
Is there?
I got a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Off the wall question. Bowing down, that's the ultimate show of respect. You know, from the military background, we send to detention, whatever, we do a salute. But bowing down, that should only be saved for the Lord. I mean, I can't think of other instances where, you know, you watch the old movies, whatever, bowing down to the king, all that.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a good point to bring up, because there is a little bit of that there, okay? In that culture and in that time, kings and people of high, you know, especially kings, especially Persian kings, kind of proclaim themselves to be deity. But the bowing down was probably more like taking a knee, and it could also meant prostrating themselves. So there could have been a little bit of element of Mordecai saying, "I'm not going to bow down in worship." You know what I mean? Type of situation. But at the same time, if you really look at the whole story, Mordecai's not a perfect character either. And there's a little bit of pride in Mordecai. Because why doesn't Mordecai like Haman to begin with?
He's an Agagite.
Because he's an Agagite, right? Or however you pronounce it.
Yeah.
Man. He is an Amalekite descendant. Okay? A few weeks ago, we did the lesson on Aaron and Hur holding up Moses' arms when they were moving from Egypt to the Promised Land in that battle. And who were they fighting that day? The Amalekites. And God had even prophesied and said, the Amalekites are a descendant of Esau, by the way. And and God had even prophesied through, who was the bad guy that prophesied in that time? Anybody help me? Balaam. Yes, Balaam. Balaam even prophesied that the Amalekites were going to be wiped out, that God was going to destroy the Amalekites completely from the face of the earth. Later on, King Saul is ordered to go and fight against King Agag and to completely annihilate them. And what does he not do? He doesn't kill the king. Right? Then Samuel, or the prophet, comes along and hacks him to pieces. But anyway, and that's the beginning kind of the downfall of Saul, right? And so Mordecai, so I'm saying all that just to kind of point out that these guys are just naturally sworn enemies, ancient enemies, if you will. And so I don't know that Mordecai is actually not bowing down because he doesn't want to prostrate him. You know what I mean? You know what I mean? There's some stuff going on there, right? Not only to mention that even as this starts, after all this takes place, it says after all this took place. Well, what took place just before this? Well, what just took place before this was that Mordecai learns about a plot to assassinate. But guess who doesn't get recognized? Mordecai. Right? So there's a whole lot of stuff happening here, right? Between these two individuals, as this kind of happens and as this kind of plays out.
Well, and Steve, you know, and that's carried forward even to today. I mean, he would be essentially like a Talladega leaper.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and that's still the lineage of all that has continued
Yes.
to today. So it used to be asking a Jewish person to bow down to somebody in the Talladega.
Yeah.
Same sort of thing.
Yeah, very much. Very, very, very much. I mean, this has been a struggle, right? That has went on for thousands of years, right? In all of this. And then there's also this thing that's happening here. There's also this kind of little subplot that's happening here, where it's almost as if, to begin with, I don't know if Haman even recognizes that Mordecai is not bowing down until other people tell him about it. Right? We've got other people that are coming in this picture and they're going, hey, Mordecai, you need to do this. You need to bow down. How come you're not bowing down? And they warn him and they warn him and he doesn't do anything, so what do?
Tell him.
They go tell on him. Yeah, they go rat him out and they go, look, he's not doing this. And it's at that point that Haman is filled with rage. Right? So there's a whole bunch of tension and all these things that are kind of happening in this. But so my question for you guys in this is, we think about pride and we think about humility. Is there such thing as good pride? A healthy amount of pride?
Well, if you're saying like pride in workmanship, take pride in the job that you do, yeah, I think it's healthy pride.
Okay. I agree. What? Anything else? Any?
Well, as a new grandpa.
Yeah.
When somebody asks what Sunday school class I go to, I tell them Steve Ellis's class. And I'm not ashamed of it. And what's that called?
Misguided. I don't know what that might be. But there is do you guys think there's a healthy amount of pride? A healthy amount of pride that a person ought to have?
Yes, there has to be. There's got to be, or you wouldn't have any respect for yourself.
Yeah.
Okay. I think so too. But where is that? So where is that line though? You know what I mean? Where is that line, and how do we differentiate between a healthy sense of pride and a sinful kind of pride?
When you're comparing yourself to others.
Okay?
I remember a football player, I think it was Jerry Rice, said, I don't need God, I'm better than that.
See, I think that's where you cross the line, is you become boastful about it.
Yeah.
Okay?
So if you're taking pride in your work, you would be comparing it to your best effort. You want to do your best, and if you've done your best, then you feel really good about that, and it's not comparing what you're doing to what somebody else is doing. But
Okay.
I think you have to remember where your abilities come from. Even though you're proud of them, it came from the Lord.
Yeah.
You may be good at what you do, but there's a reason for it.
Mm-hmm.
It's not because of you.
Yeah, I think that's a good place that's a good line in there, you know what I mean? To recognize that, our blessings come from Him, our abilities come from Him, and even if He's given us an ability to do good work, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. That or He's blessed us with, children or grandchildren that we're proud of, you know what I mean? That we need to recognize that those things are a gift from God. Those things aren't necessarily something that we've earned or something that we deserve. It's just a blessing, that we have received. So, but there is this danger that we kind of see in this passage, right? There is this danger that comes into, I think that we kind of need to watch out for, that the promotion seemed to be a hot spot for Haman, right? It seems like his attitude may have been one thing, but when he got that promotion, something may have changed. So you just got, oh man, did you say you got a promotion?
I did. I did.
What a great timing, right? So y'all can help Nicole. Right? Let's all help Nicole out here today, this morning. Congratulations again on that.
Thank you.
But whenever you do get a promotion, or whenever you are recognized, like Jim talked about, for doing good work, right? Or for some kind of accomplishment, how do you kind of keep that like harnessed a little bit and demonstrate a humble spirit?
I think you need to remember everyone that helped you get to that point. Because you didn't do it on your own.
And as she did, she praised God for it.
Yes.
Yeah, right? Yeah, absolutely.
And I think you also surround yourself with people who could keep you in check. I think sometimes you'll say things without really realizing that there's anything. Somebody goes, hey. I mean, that's all they have to say sometimes. You go, oh, okay, well. But I think that's helpful, to keep reminding yourself that as a friend to someone, it's also part of your responsibility to help them stay clear.
And sometimes, and I think that's a good thing to notice, because sometimes when we get promoted, or whenever we receive these accomplishments, there is a pattern that we're going to see develop through the rest of this story, where Haman has people in his life that are trying to check him, and he is not paying attention to the checks. Right. He's not paying attention to the people that are going, right? Until it's way too late. I mean, at the end of the story, finally his wife and his family are going to say, you're not overcoming this guy. And then it's too late. He's summoned away to the second beast, right? Yeah, but I think that's a great point. We need to keep those kind of people in our life that keep us grounded, that keep us, that remind us of all of those things. You know what I mean? As well, for sure. So, yeah. So whenever we get promotions, whenever we, have an accomplishment, have an achievement, we need to embrace those and accept those kind of things with humility, and be careful not to leverage that for personal gain. Because that's what we're going to see Haman do, right? Haman is going to take this promotion and he's going to leverage it to try to bring about something it's all a personal thing for him. Okay?
Think about how difficult this is and part of why I think it's so difficult for us to actually have good Christian leaders run for offices. I mean, that's a really difficult meeting. It's, I guess I'm just thinking right now, like Josh Hawley, he seems like he's been a pretty, he does a white Christian show and all sorts of stuff. I mean, it seems like the advertisements we've been seeing and consuming, right? And how difficult it is.
Yes. And especially as our culture, you know what I mean, as I talked about earlier, is shifting toward self-promotion and, you know what I mean, and all of that, all of that. It's very, very difficult, I think. And, yeah, super difficult. And I think it's going to get harder and harder, for sure. It's a great point. Anything else, you guys? Okay, let's go ahead and see what happens whenever after they tattletale on Mordecai. Somebody read verses 6 through 9.
And when he learned of Malachi's ethnic identity, it seemed repugnant to Haman to do away with Malachi alone. He planned to destroy all Malachi's people, the Jews. Throughout
Xerxes is easier to say.
yeah, Assyria's kingdom. In the first month, the month of Nisan, the king of Assyria's 12th year, the pur, that is, the lot, was cast before Haman for each day in each month. And it fell in the 12th month, the month of Adar. Then Haman informed King Assyrius, there is one ethnic group scattered throughout the peoples in every province of your kingdom, keeping themselves separate. Their laws are different from everyone else's, and they do not obey the king's laws. It is not in the king's best interest to tolerate them. If the king approves, let an order be drawn up authorizing their destruction, and I will pay 375 tons of silver to the officials for deposit in the royal treasury.
Okay. So immediately, there's several things here, right? We see Haman's going to take advantage of his new position, right? And relationship with the king to hatch this plan to not only, I mean, who's he mad at? One guy, apparently. But there's something else, like there's something more deep-seated in him, right? And it's almost now, it's interesting how it reads there in verse 6, and when he learned of Mordecai's ethnic identity, right? So he already didn't like him. But now, what's his feelings?
Doesn't like his people.
I hate him. And I don't just hate him. I hate all of them. Right? And so basically what we see happen here is this promotion, this new position has really went to his head. Right? I mean we're talking like, I got a big head, but I mean this guy's noggin must have really swelled, right? What we see happening here is now his pride is just simply out of control, right? And that's what can happen, and that is a danger that we need to be aware of. Have you ever seen somebody's pride just get out of control?
Oh, yeah.
Honestly, the two people in Take that did the promotion that I was doing, that I'm taking over, they let it get to their heads.
Okay. So you're going to have to be on guard, right? For that. And work to keep a humble attitude, a humble spirit, and maybe especially with those that are going to be working, you know what I mean, under your direction, under your direction and under your leadership, it's pretty rare to see it go this crazy, right? Like this guy's level of pride is, through the roof, right? So if an achievement or a position or a promotion can lead to this kind of downfall, how can Nicole leverage this instead of he went about it to leverage it to lift himself up even higher, right? I mean, and in fact, he's telling lies, about the whole of the Jewish people, right? Because they're not all breaking the law. They're not all, you know what I mean? In fact, you got to remember that a whole bunch of them have already went home and this group stayed. Okay? So the question, I guess I'll come back to my question. So instead of that, how do you leverage your achievement or your position to instead honor God and lift others up? Because that's a different thing, right?
See, and I always, even with because I'm still going to be working in the field, but like I always have put, God first. And so all my work is honoring Him and doing the hands and feet. And so it's just going to be, I don't know, just keeping that mindset and
Yeah.
when I go into this new stuff. So
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. It's a good way to stay grounded, right? For sure. What are the thoughts? Any other thoughts? Any other questions?
Well, Steve, I was thinking about.
Any other suggestions?
The idea, well, the negative aspect of it is, Satan he's the originator of pride. And wanted to worship for himself instead of for God, and got him tossed out of heaven. And so when we're having that kind of pride, that's who we're patterning ourselves after. And it always leads to downfall.
Yeah.
Kind of reminds me of Adolf Hitler. He wanted to exterminate the Jews also. And promote himself, of course. So,
Yeah. Yeah. And there's a whole other thing we can go into that with just the history of the Jewish people. You know what I mean? Throughout history. But
I think there's a way to, if people would, a suggestion, if people would do what, Mary's Magnificat, she writes down her prayer and she writes down the things that have happened to her. And we see that also with Elizabeth. And so, people, when they write down the things they feel when they are blessed and recognize that it's definitely God who does this, if you can get that down on paper, if people write like that, then you can always go back and look. You can make that a monthly thing or a weekly thing if you need it. And that's helpful just to keep you grounded. That is much easier to look at something that I've written before and go, okay, I gotta get back there.
yeah.
That's really helpful.
Yeah, that's a great point, because what happened, our memories fade,
They do.
right? Even our perception of how things happen
Yes.
change, you know what I mean? Or we lose some of those details, some of those insights maybe that we had at that particular time. And I think that's a great idea. Great idea.
When you get a position of authority or supervisory position, you have those that are under you, give them the same tools you had to make it to that position you've gotten. Help build them up and give them the credit when the credit's due to them. I think that will help keep you humble also.
Yeah. So next thing kind of happens in our story is King can't sleep, right? Can't sleep, suffers from a little insomnia, has somebody come in and start reading through things that have happened. He wrote things down, except he didn't have to do it. Other people wrote it down for him.
He described it.
They wrote down everything for him. And he says, hey, come back and read that back to me. Read back, maybe that'll help put me to sleep. That sounds boring. And they just happened to read about when they wrote down about the assassination attempt and everything. And he's like, hey, did we ever do anything for that guy? And they're like, no, you didn't do anything to honor the guy that saved your life. And so the king's going to summon Haman, and he asks Haman for his advice. Hey, what should we do for somebody? Without naming Mordecai, he just says, hey, what should we do for somebody that's really deserving of a great honor? and Haman just lays it on thick. And then this is where the king's going to respond. Somebody read verses 10 through 14.
The king told Haman, "Hurry and do just as you proposed. Take a garment and a horse for Mordecai, the Jew, who is sitting at the king's gate. Do not leave out anything you have suggested." So Haman took the garment and the horse. He clothed Mordecai and paraded him through the city square, calling out before him, "This is what is done for the man the king wants to honor." And then Mordecai returned to the king's gate, but Haman hurried off for home, mournful and with his head covered. Haman told his wife Zeresh and all his friends everything that had happened. His advisors and his wife Zeresh said to him, "Since Mordecai is Jewish, and you have begun to fall before him, you won't overcome him, because your downfall is certain." While they were still speaking with him, the king's eunuchs arrived and rushed Haman to the banquet Esther had prepared.
Okay. All right. So, one of the, you know how I am. Little things stick with me. Little things stand out to me. It's interesting to me that in all of this discourse and all of these conversations, Haman never mentions the ethnicity of the people that he wants to destroy. But whenever the king speaks to Haman here, he calls Mordecai a Jew. He knows his ethnicity, right? And I just think that's kind of interesting that the king knew, and I don't know that Haman knew to begin with, but even that's not a very good, doesn't cast very good light on the king either, that he's just kind of dubious to this whole plot and this whole plan that Haman has tried to hatch, because even here at this point, the king doesn't know. The plan is still on at this point. But we see this amazing role reversal happen, right? We see Haman being honored, and Haman not dealing with it well. We see Mordecai being lifted up now, and what's Mordecai's response?
He goes back to where he began.
He goes back to work. He goes right back to work. Mm-hmm. He goes right back to his job. He goes right back to the city gate. When it says that he went back to the city gate, it might as well read, he went back to work. Okay? So that's a great point there. But so we just got a couple minutes left. Why is pride so and so displeasing to God?
Because you're not honoring him and giving him the glory for what he's done for you.
Okay.
Well, it's placing another God before God.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think it goes back to even what you said a little bit earlier, Joe. You know what I mean? With Satan's being cast out of heaven, right? Even that original sin in the garden really was a sin of pride. You know, why did Adam and Eve so easily fall? That was like the poorest deception ever. That was like the poorest example of temptation ever. But they fell for it. Because the serpent told them what they wanted to hear. You ever thought about that?
Believing what their itching ears want to hear.
Yeah, it was pride. They fell for it that quick. And it wasn't even a good temptation. It wasn't even that deceptive. But it was what they wanted to hear. And I think that's one of the reasons that that pride is just, it's so displeasing to God, because it affects primarily our relationship with Him, right? And it also affects our relationship with other people. It's one of the things that is so, it just can be so destructive. It can be so divisive. And it can get, like in this story, completely out of control if it's not checked. Or if we don't have people that will help check it for us. So, I used to say to this group all the time when it was just choir people that I'm preaching to the choir, because it literally was the choir people or the praise team when we started 14 years ago. And so I don't think, even as I look at you guys and I look around the room, I know this is not an issue for you guys. You guys are very, very humble people. And you live this out and you model it extremely well. So, for you guys, what is the key to humility? How do you live this way? How do you stay as humble as you are and live out this kind of humility? What is the key? How do you do it?
God. Reading the Bible, studying, keep learning about Him.
Keep God in your heart.
Remember the blessings I've been given.
I think if you see this carried out in the workplace, regardless of what position you're in, in our day-to-day lives, in church and everywhere else, it's so easy to criticize and to find fault. In the workplace, it's really easy to get written up for this or that seems to be a lot of different cases of things. It's really difficult to build people up all the time. Every place struggles with that. And everybody struggles with that in their day-to-day lives, I think. But that's really, I think, one of the ways is just trying to build others up is probably a big part of actual humility. But it's so difficult. And then we're terrible, we talked about this before, we're terrible at taking kindness.
Yeah.
Just say thank you. It's not prideful to say, if somebody tells you that you're doing a great job of teaching this class.
Yeah.
And
I
you
struggle
just say-
with that.
You just say, thank you, I really appreciate it.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm terrible at this, which is what we usually do.
Yeah.
But I
Yeah,
think
or we
that's
make a
practical-
joke about them being like, a little off kilter or something.
Right, but I think that's really one of the things that practically,
Yeah.
it's really tough.
Doesn't it come down to what we call the golden rule and doing for others what we want them to do for us?
I think it's also helpful for us not to take our leaders, the people who are over us, who are getting promotions, to not take them for granted and to also encourage them, you deserve that. I'm glad you got that, and
Right.
just something, or even something minor that has happened that they've done for you, remind them explicitly what it was and say, you said so-and-so about me, thank you for that. I appreciate that encouragement. And then that allows them that you're actually seeing them. They don't have to holler at you and force you to look at them. I mean, it's
Yeah.
easier if you can encourage everybody, but especially those guys who are above you.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I think all of those things are really great. I think just pull all of that together, guys, and just be those kind of people that, we talked earlier about sometimes you need people in your life that are going to help hold you accountable, help kind of keep you in check. So we need that, but we also need those people that are going to encourage us. You know what I mean? And they're going to encourage us in the right way and push us in the right things. And sometimes we get to the point where we don't listen to the people that are constantly, and I don't mean this, I mean even in a positive way, checking us if they never encourage us. Right? I mean, people need encouragement. And if they're getting the encouragement from you, they'll take the check.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But if they never get anything from you but criticism, I'm going to cut you out. No, I'm kidding, right? But you know what I'm talking about. All of us know what that's like. We know what it's like to be around people that are just constantly, well, even in the church, right? I mean, Mickey mowed the grass diagonal this week. I mean, seriously, who has time for that? No. But you know, and I'm making that up. I'm just using that as a crazy example. But it's so easy to be critical over dumb things.
Well, and you gotta be careful too, and I've told this to, well, employees and other folks too, but, it's a really, it's a true saying, as dumb as it sounds, but be really careful about accepting criticism from someone who wouldn't take advice.
Yeah.
Because there are those that are gonna tear you down and really be like, you just gotta say it. I don't take advice from that person, I don't have the same.
So I don't need to take criticism from them either, right?
So I mean, it's not that I'm not gonna, they think about, okay, if this was legitimate, okay, but a lot of times they're not.
Yeah. And sometimes pride will take root in us, and pride will build, and pride will start to grow in an unhealthy way whenever we're not receiving any encouragement.
That's right.
When we're not receiving any encouragement from somebody, we're like, well, then I'm going to do it. I'm going to promote myself because nobody else is encouraging me. And then it can just kind of go crazy, right? So, and it's hard to surround yourself with people that'll do that. So just be that kind of people for others, right? Look for ways, encourage, and then whenever necessary, check one another and say, I'm not sure that's healthy. You know what I mean? And then point them back to all the stuff that you guys talked about. Point them back to the source of their blessings. Point them back to all the things that God has done for them. Point them back to all the goodness they have in Christ. Point them toward all the value they have in Christ. Right? And then we won't seek or feel that need to promote ourselves or to have that kind of ego that says, I'm the greatest. Right? So, encourage one another. Walk in humility. You guys are doing an awesome job of this. Like I said, this is one of those lessons that I'm just like, this class doesn't need this lesson. But
we do need to be reminded.
Sure, absolutely. But I'm just doing that. I'm just saying that as a way to, you guys are doing a great job. Keep up the good work. And thank you guys so much for all of your input, all of your discussion on this today. And go see Esther. It's really good. All right, guys, have a great.
If you guys haven't seen the movie, The